Joining me now, Rick Crawford, Congressman for the 1st Congressional District of Arkansas, Republican of Jonesboro, Chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Good to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
You bet. Good to be with you.
All right, we got a little bit of activity in the Middle East, and I want to get your take on this, particularly in your role as the House Intelligence Chair. Assess this situation today between Israel and Iran. My take is Israel is in a position of strength. Iran is weak. Russia can't really come in and help it too
Mhm.
much. I don't know if China can or not, but what's your take on the situation between Israel and Iran today?
Yeah, I think you touched on some pretty key elements of that relationship, of that situation. One is, Russia's not really in any position to provide any material support for Iran. China might be, but I'm not sure it's in their interest to do that. I mean, they've got enough problems of their own without trying to really aggravate the United States any more than they already are. So I'm not sure how much a role they can play there. So if you think about then Iran's position in the Gulf region, they are viewed largely as a belligerent hegemon, if you will. And so while we can sit back and go, Israel's doing this unilaterally, and that's true to some degree, we're offering a lot of support, but the other Gulf states might say publicly, yeah, we're against this. But privately, they know this had to happen because they dislike Iran maybe as much or almost as much as Israel does. And they knew that this had to happen. And quite frankly, this is sort of a culmination of, what, 46 years of belligerent behavior in the region. Since 1979 Islamic Revolution, when the Shah was deposed and the Ayatollah Khomeini came to power, they have been a thorn in our side in more ways than one. But most recently, with their activity, supporting proxy groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. But even going back 10 years, think about the role they played in insurgents in Iraq, for example. They even played a role to some degree in Afghanistan back in the 80s,
Yep.
as they were sort of stirring things up there with the Soviets, not with the Soviets, but as much as anything in support of the Soviets against Afghanistan and by extension the United States. So this has been a long time coming. Israel sees them as an existential threat. I agree. They've said for a long time that Israel was on the cusp of developing a nuclear weapon, and there's been an ebb and flow to that development. I think that Israel is really good at intelligence collection, and if they say that they were on the precipice of developing a nuclear weapon, a deliverable warhead, I'm going to take them at their word, and they acted on that.
So here's where we are today as you and I speak. The President Trump, has delayed for about 2 weeks to allow some form of diplomacy to try to cool some things off at this time. But he will be weighing the decision of whether or not to go in and, annihilate this underground, the subterranean bunker where all of this Iranian enrichment occurs of uranium. Would you be supportive of that?
I would, and I think it's the president's decision to make. If he chooses to take that action, then he'll probably, after the fact, he'll come back and report formally to Congress that he's taken that action, and that would be, in compliance with the laws that govern executive action on the use of military. I mean, if we were going to do a prolonged action, obviously he would come to Congress and ask for an authorization for use of military force or a declaration of war, as the case may dictate. But I think we're a long way from having to take that consideration up. I think what we will likely see is this 2 weeks is really designed to keep the diplomatic door open, even if it's just a little bit. And then also gives us a little more time to harden our defenses with regard to our regional assets, making sure that we're prepared for any retaliatory strikes. And then also, not just regionally, but I think we need to recognize that Iran is really good at cyber. And so to the extent that they have any bandwidth left from a leadership perspective, they may try to strike back using cyber. And that may be their only option. If we've seen that the Israelis have taken out about half or more of their ballistic missile capability. If we go and help them finish this job with regard to their taking out their nuclear capability, that doesn't leave them a whole lot of options offensively. So cyber may be that option that they may try to exercise on us. And again, that a lot of that hinges on how much of a leadership cadre they have remaining. And so that remains to be seen. So I think the president is showing some restraint here because he's also trying to make sure that we are postured appropriately for any retaliatory action.
I do not have to tell you, you will understand this, that there is a conflict between isolationists and internationalists on U.S. participation in any of this military activity in Iran. If we stepped in, how do we step back out without finding ourselves in another Iraq or Afghanistan, or you could even go back to Vietnam even? How do we avoid
Mhm.
a quagmire?
Well, I mean, a lot of this has to do with troops. I don't think anybody is even considering boots on the ground, actually committing U.S. troops to this type of action, and I don't even think that's necessary. I think what the intelligence tells Israel and to the extent that they're sharing with us and what we can see with our own eyes and our ability to collect there is probably there's a popular support for for this action. Now, nobody has stated that regime change is the goal here. Israel's been very, very clear that their goal is to take out their ballistic missile capability and also dismantle their nuclear capability. Now, in the process of achieving those goals, if they're able to affect regime change and support potentially a popular uprising to that end, then that's a positive outcome, a positive byproduct, but it's not the stated goal. So, would we be happy if the Ayatollah were deposed? We'd be particularly happy if he was deposed by an organic internal domestic effort to do so. And I think there's a very good likelihood that that could happen. So again, not the stated goal, but certainly something that would benefit not only Israel and the United States, but I think even the Gulf states would applaud that.
But I hear you saying you don't think that the military action on this one front would lead to a longer type of campaign.
No, I really don't. I think because of the nature of this type of strike, this is pretty much going to put an end to the regime's ability to make war. I mean, we've already seen their leadership cadre is decimated. Anybody that's left is probably fleeing. They're even the secondary leaders in many cases have also been eliminated. So I think we're decreasing their bench with every strike the Israelis make. They are decreasing the depth that they have to offer from a leadership perspective. So I think the Iranians will probably engage on their own. And look, the reality is, and I think President Trump would say this, he'd really like to see Iran saved for the Iranians, but let them develop their own governance and put somebody in there that is committed to uh, Iranian freedom and not the suppression of the Iranian people. And that's what this regime has done since 1979.
All right, let's turn our attention to another international development. This one's got a little bit more impact in your corner of the state.
Mm-hmm.
Steel comes to an agreement with Japanese steelmaker Nippon Steel. Are you okay with the terms of this deal, this national security agreement, this golden share, this,
Mm-hmm.
we get a one board member, we get input on domestic steel production decisions. What is this a good deal?
Yeah, I think it's a good deal. And when you think about the $11 billion investment from Nippon to help shore up really an American legacy company, U.S. Steel, broadly, this is a good deal, but specifically, it's a very good deal for Arkansas and particularly my district. 3 billion of that 11 billion will go directly to Mississippi County for expansion there. And for some particular, I think, important national security elements, one of those is grain-oriented electrical steel, which is produced to help build transformers to enhance our electrical grid. So that is a national security imperative. We've been outsourcing that for too long, and so now we're bringing that home, and we'll have a domestic source for that important part of our electrical grid. So this is a win for the American people. It's certainly a win for Arkansas, and I can tell you for the folks in Mississippi County, they're thrilled as well.
All right. Lastly, any farm bill updates? Anything making some progress that you can report on?
Yeah, I tell you, we did an awful lot in the what we call the OB3 One Big Beautiful Bill Act. OB3 in the House version, it's almost like a mini farm bill if you really want to get down to it. We were able to fix an awful lot that should make the farm bill process a little smoother and a little easier, a little less controversial. But it's really about trying to shore up some of the weaknesses in farm programs. For example, the PLC program, we were basically running on very outdated information as it applies to setting those reference prices based on input costs. That was a really about 2010 data that was never implemented from a policy perspective until 2012, which didn't have impact until 2014. And since we run those programs 18 months in arrears, you can see that we're behind the power curve. So updating those reference prices will go an awful long way in helping to shore up some of the economic support that's necessary in rural America. Now, that said, we've still got problems on the economic front for agriculture, and we're doing everything we can to address that as well. But this is a big win for rural America and particularly ag producers.
All right. He's Congressman Rick Crawford. He represents the first district of Arkansas. Always good to get him on with us. And thanks for sharing your insight and your take.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate it.